The moment I opened my eyes, I found myself thrust into the unforgiving world of train survival. It is a place where every passenger is forced to disembark at each station to explore, driven by the singular goal of staying alive. While the lucky few might stumble upon rare treasures, the unlucky ones often pay for their curiosity with their lives, proving that opportunity and danger truly walk hand in hand here. To survive, one must gather supplies and upgrade their carriage, eventually building a personalized train world of their own. However, I entered this game with an advantage no one else possesses, a one-of-a-kind ascension ability. Anything I hold in my hands can be evolved to its utmost potential, turning the mundane into the extraordinary. A crude dagger can be refined into an enchanted sharp blade and eventually become the eternal cutter. Even a simple white forest fruit tree can be elevated into a blessed tree, and finally, into Venus's golden fruit tree. Even a common beehive is not exempt, as I can transform it into a giant wasp hive or even a nano-future hive. While the rest of the world is still desperately fighting over a single piece of bread, I continue to grow stronger through this power, leaving everyone else trailing in the dust. I looked around my surroundings and wondered if even the train itself could be subject to this evolution. It seems my intuition was correct, because even before the first station arrived, I had already secured a massive lead. A notification pulsed in my mind, informing me that the ascension was successful and that I had broken a record, which in turn unlocked the Destiny Divergence module. As the conductor, I was told that I may now choose my next station. I braced myself as the system warned me to sit tight and hold on, for the train was finally about to arrive at its first stop. Before I continue my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It truly means a lot to me. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Now, let me take you back to what happened a few hours earlier. The haunting message echoed in the void, wishing me eternal life as the train prepared to depart. When I finally opened my eyes, a sharp ache pulsed through my head, and I found myself rubbing my temples while staring at the unfamiliar interior of a train carriage. I couldn't recall a single detail of how I had arrived here. My last memory was simply staying up late to watch anime before a sudden darkness swallowed my vision, leaving a frustrating gap in my mind. For a moment, I wondered if I had actually died from overworking and been sent straight to hell, but the same mysterious voice from before interrupted my grim thoughts. The voice announced that all survivors had awakened and began distributing the basic train regulations. I listened closely as the rules were laid out. I was never to abandon my train, and I learned that every 24 hours after departure, we would arrive at a new station. These docks would last for 3 hours, giving us the choice to disembark or stay on board. The goal was to collect resources to upgrade the train and unlock new modules, but the voice was clear about one thing. I was not to leave the train before reaching a station. The final command was simple and chilling: survive. As the announcement concluded with a strict warning to abide by these rules, I was informed that the first station would arrive in just 1 hour. The length of the message prompted me to reflexively pinch my cheek, and the sharp sting confirmed that this was no dream. As my headache began to fade, I struggled up from the cold floor to survey my surroundings. It was exactly as it appeared, a solitary carriage hurtling through an endless wilderness that streamed past the windows. The only notable feature was an oval-shaped device at the front, topped with a luminous screen that boldly displayed the words Train Control System. Without hesitation, I approached and touched it, prompting the system to offer me options for conductor info, train details, a trading platform, and a chat room. Curious, I opened the chat room and saw that it was at its full capacity of 10,000 people. The messages flooded past in a frantic blur. One person was screaming about their wealth and demanding to be let out. Another was searching desperately for their medication. And a woman named Xiaowen was calling out for her husband. Some wondered if they had been isekai'd, while one cynical soul even cheered about not having to deal with their boss the next day. However, my eyes caught a message from someone who claimed we were all just bad actors in a reality show. He declared that he was getting off immediately to prove it wasn't real, ignoring the warnings from others. Within a minute, his name vanished, and the occupant count dropped to 9,999. I felt a chill as I wondered if he had truly died, but I shook my head and decided to stop dwelling on it. I closed the chat and swiped over to my train details. It was a level 1 train with no extra carriages, moving at a meager 20 kilometers per hour. It possessed a basic workbench for recycling and a level 1 frame, wheels, and base. The requirements for an upgrade were steep: 100 kilograms of wood, 150 kilograms of metal, and 50 mechanical parts. The speed caught my attention. If arrival times were fixed at 24-hour intervals, I questioned why speed would matter at all. Furthermore, if 10,000 people were arriving at once, the scale of the station would have to be enormous. I looked out at the wilderness again, struck by a sudden unsettling thought. Perhaps the speed mattered because if I moved too slowly, something might eventually catch up to me. Continuing my inspection, I opened my personal info screen. My name and ID were listed alongside my sanity and stamina stats, both sitting at a full 100. The sanity meter warned of various stages of mental decline, from fatigue to total madness, while stamina was tied to my physical ability to function. There were no abilities listed, but under the talent section I saw a word that changed everything. Sublimation. When I looked into it, the system explained that I could expend stamina or sanity to evolve or upgrade any existence without any restrictions on category or level. I quickly searched the chat room for any mention of talents, but found nothing at all. If such powers were common, someone would have surely bragged about them by now, which led me to believe that talent holders were exceptionally rare. I pondered why I had been granted this cheat ability, and it dawned on me that I had always been slightly different back home. I remembered how broken computers would suddenly run high-end games after I touched them, or how regular cars seemed to reach impossible speeds. My friends used to joke that I was pleasing machine spirits, but I had always dismissed it as a series of coincidences. Now, this description confirmed that it had been real all along. I wondered how far I could push this power to sublimate anything. I walked over to the workbench where a water bottle, a loaf of bread, and a small knife had been placed as starter gear. I looked at the level 1 shoddy dagger and internally commanded it to sublimate. An invisible force instantly enveloped the crude blade, and I felt my stamina drop from 100 to 90. In an instant, it transformed into a level 2 enchanted sharp dagger. The excitement surged through me as the blade gleamed coldly in my hand. The talent actually worked, and the stamina cost was perfectly manageable. I swung the dagger, listening to it whistle sharply through the air, amazed that such a high-quality weapon had come from such shoddy materials. A new, more ambitious idea took hold of me as I looked around the carriage. The description had said I could sublimate any existence, and that had to include the train itself. Taking a deep breath with my eyes sparkling in anticipation, I approached the control panel and placed my hand firmly on the oval device, silently giving the command to sublimate. The invisible force manifested once more, but this time I felt my stamina draining at a much more alarming rate than when I had upgraded the small knife. A heavy exhaustion settled over me as I watched my stamina plummet from 90 to a mere 30. I collapsed onto the floor, huffing out a weary breath, yet I couldn't suppress a surge of exhilaration as I watched the train transform before my eyes. A notification confirmed that the upgrade was successful, bringing the train to level 2, and revealing the steep material requirements for the next stage: 200 kilograms of wood, 200 mechanical parts, and 400 kilograms of metal blocks. Beyond the physical changes, I had unlocked several upgrade options, and more importantly, a reward for breaking the record for the fastest train upgrade, a special module card. Once I managed to catch my breath, I took a moment to carefully examine the train's current status. Reaching level 2 had automatically improved the chassis, frame, wheels, and workbench, effectively doubling our speed from 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. What truly piqued my interest, however, was the sense that I could still sublimate this train further. Unlike the knife, which felt as though it had nearly exhausted its potential, the train's ceiling seemed much higher. I knew my current reserves wouldn't be enough to push it again immediately unless I tapped into my mental energy. But after remembering the warnings about sanity, I decided to temporarily shelve that dangerous idea. Instead, I turned my attention to the new upgrade options and the special module card. The level 2 upgrade menu offered 4 blueprints: a basic carriage for free, a water tank for 1 coin, a burst acceleration device for 5, and the ability to extend docking time for 2 coins. I frowned slightly, realizing that these train coins must be the local currency. Since I didn't have a single one, I worried that I might be forced into the free option and lose out on the others. Fortunately, the system confirmed that I could reserve these choices for up to 3 station stops. Relieved, I extracted the free basic carriage blueprint, noting its substantial material requirements. I decided against sublimating the blueprint itself for now, fearing that an upgrade might make the construction costs impossible to meet before I had even secured the basic resources. I turned my focus to the special module card, which materialized as a diamond-shaped card wreathed in pale blue particles above my palm. The description was frustratingly vague, stating only that it would grant a special module upon activation. Naturally, I couldn't suppress the thought of sublimating the card itself. Although my stamina was low, I still had my mental energy, and a quick meal of bread and water had miraculously restored my stamina to 50. I murmured to myself that testing it shouldn't be a problem, and silently gave the command to sublimate. The invisible force returned with a vengeance, and the card released a brilliant spray of blue particles that looked like shooting stars. From an outside perspective, the train must have looked like a comet trailing blue flames as it accelerated through the void. When the light finally faded, I felt a heavy lethargy settle into my bones. My stamina had dropped to 20, and my mental energy sat at 60, triggering a mental fatigue status. Despite the high cost of 70 total points, the result was worth it. The special module card had evolved into an exclusive module card. I lay on the floor examining the card, wondering what mental fatigue actually entailed, since I didn't feel particularly different. Perhaps my physical exhaustion was simply masking the mental strain. I offered a quick scattered prayer to every deity I could think of, from the ancients to the God Emperor, before finally activating the card. Azure light enveloped me as the system congratulated me on obtaining a unique conductor module called the Crossroads of Fate. Its effect was simple yet profound. My path would always present a second choice, and different choices would lead to different destinies. Before I could dive deeper into the details, the train's PA system crackled to life, announcing our imminent arrival at the first station. I was shocked to realize an entire hour had already passed without me noticing. With only 1 minute left, a second interface appeared, courtesy of my new module. I was presented with two choices: Platform 1, the swampland, or Platform 2, the armory. Recognizing this as the power of my exclusive module, I didn't hesitate. I chose the armory, reasoning that while others might be looking for food, nothing would provide more security in this world than weapons. As soon as I made my selection, the space ahead of the train distorted violently, resembling the open maw of a great beast. The train whistle shrieked as we plunged through the warped reality, and the surroundings transformed completely. We had arrived. The docking countdown began at 3 hours, and to my immense relief, the system reported that no hazards were detected at the station. The train gradually slowed to a crawl, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks fading into a heavy silence as I arrived at my first stop. Standing before the sealed door, I took a deep breath to steady my nerves, tightening my grip on my sublimated dagger before pressing the release button. Outside, the world was draped in an oppressive pitch-black void. Yet strangely, a massive building the size of a matchbox stood clearly in my line of sight. Looking up, I realized there was no sun in the sky, yet the road beneath me and the structure ahead were perfectly visible. It struck me then that space traversal is truly an incredible power. It certainly explained why all the trains shared the same arrival times despite the distances. I stepped off the train, reaching the entrance in fewer than 10 steps. The massive doors were shut tight, but I managed to pry a gap open with my dagger. As the heavy leaf swung wide, a wave of rotten stench hit me square in the face. I walked inside to find rows of neatly arranged wooden crates, the clear source of the decaying odor. Using my blade, I pried the rusted iron locks off the nearest crate. Inside, 2 bolt-action rifles lay half-buried in wood shavings. The system identified them as low-level marksman rifles, each equipped with 20 low-grade bullets, 2 guns and 40 rounds in just 1 crate. This was good stuff. I spent the next hour opening several crates in a row and hauling the loot back to the train. After several trips, the adrenaline-fueled strength I'd been running on began to hit its limit. My stamina had dropped to 15 points. The repeated use of sublimation had already pushed my physical boundaries, though my excitement had somehow allowed my spirit to recover to 70. With 3 hours of docking time and no energy replenishment, I realized I wouldn't have much strength left to move supplies if I didn't pace myself. After resting, I shifted from heavy lifting to exploration. In a side room, I spotted several sealed iron boxes on a shelf that reminded me of military supply videos I'd seen back home. The markings on the surface were blurred, but I felt a surge of nervous anticipation as I swallowed hard and pried one open. Inside were neatly arranged blocks of compressed biscuits, looking like bars of gold, and emitting a faint milky aroma mixed with a fermented tang. Regardless of expiration dates, I stuffed one into my mouth immediately. It was exactly what I needed, though I quickly realized I'd need water. These things quench hunger but leave you parched. I found 4 barrels of these rations, 80 biscuits in total, enough to sustain a man for half a month. Nearby, I found sealed barrels of water, but the smell was distinctly undrinkable. Still, I moved everything onto the train. Resources were resources. The armory was a cramped, semi-enclosed space filled with collapsed shelves and rotting debris. In 2 hours, I salvaged 42 intact rifles. The rest were rusted beyond use, fit only for the processing station. I also loaded up on iron and wood. Even if I didn't use them for my own upgrades, they would be valuable for trading. With 30 minutes left on the countdown, I decided on one last trip. My carriage was getting crowded, and I knew a second carriage was my top priority. I had the wood in parts, but I was still short on metal. I headed for the innermost area, bypassing the mess to check the final rooms. These looked like foreigner living quarters. The first few were empty, but as I entered the last one, I heard a sickening crunch. I looked down to see I'd stepped on a small leg bone from a skeleton. I muttered a quick apology to the brother on the floor. I wasn't particularly afraid. Even as a kid, horror movies amused me, and I'd never been fazed by the sight of the deceased. As I withdrew my foot, I noticed a dust-covered paper document bag beneath the remains. It was strange. Iron and wood had rotted to nothing in this place, yet this paper bag was perfectly intact. Intrigued, I snatched it up and jogged back to the train to use the system's appraisal function, just in case of traps. To my surprise and delight, the screen identified it as a level 1 treasure chest. I laughed, thanking the old bone brother and promising him a proper burial later. But as I moved to open it, I paused. If I could sublimate the train, surely I could sublimate this too. My stats sat at 30 stamina and 80 spirit. I reasoned that such a small bag wouldn't drain me too much, and I could always eat another biscuit to recover. Once I'd convinced myself, the decision was effectively made. I whispered the command to sublimate. My stats began to drain instantly. A warning flashed that my spirit had fallen below 50, plunging me into a state of self-doubt. I collapsed onto the floor like a fish out of water, staring blankly at the swaying ceiling lamp. After a moment, I sat up, my stamina at 20 and spirit at 50. Honestly, it didn't feel like a big deal. Aside from the heavy physical fatigue, the self-doubt state didn't seem to hinder me. The cost to reach level 2 was 40 points, higher than I expected, but the folder was now a level 2 treasure chest. It seemed it couldn't be pushed further, perhaps lacking the potential or being capped by a rule I didn't yet understand. I rubbed my hands together and opened the folder. The rewards flashed before me. 4 train coins, a Colt M191 pistol, and a level 2 blueprint for an external garbage collector. Reflecting on the 4 coins I had just acquired, I realized that this was the primary way to obtain the local currency. I opened my train details and saw that the options appearing after the level 2 upgrade were still available at the top of the interface. Without much hesitation, I spent 3 of those train coins to purchase the basic water tank blueprint and an additional hour of docking time, leaving me with only a single coin to my name. If I can manage to find another treasure chest at the next station, I might just gather enough to meet the requirements for that acceleration device. I noticed the departure countdown had shifted to an hour and 15 minutes, so I turned my attention toward the physical rewards from the chest. The Colt M1911 felt substantial in my hand. Compared to the mass-produced firearms I had salvaged from the armory, its craftsmanship was so refined it could be considered a work of art. I quickly deduced that the firearms in this world likely shared a universal bullet type, so I loaded a magazine with low-grade ammunition to test it out. Aiming at a wooden box outside the carriage, I pulled the trigger and watched as the crate instantly shattered into splinters. The sheer power of the shot took me by surprise, and I rubbed my slightly sore palm where the recoil had bitten into the webbing of my hand. Although this handgun used the same bullets as the ones from the armory, it was clearly twice as powerful. The thought of what it might become if I sublimated it crossed my mind, but I quickly shook my head to dismiss the dangerous idea. Now was not the time for such gambles, especially since my physical and mental reserves were hovering near their limits. It would be far wiser to wait until I had recovered. After putting the pistol away, I used the control system to examine the 2 blueprints I had acquired. The basic water tank would allow me to store water and prevent it from spoiling for 10 days, requiring only 10 kilograms of metal and 20 mechanical parts. The external garbage collector was even more intriguing, as it would automatically gather and store trash from the platforms before departure. It required 30 kilograms of metal and 100 mechanical parts, with an optional modification for an additional 300 parts that would allow the workbench to automatically recycle the waste into usable materials. Looking at my current inventory of 210 kilograms of wood, 60 kilograms of metal, and 220 mechanical parts, I muttered to myself that I could afford to build both. However, doing so would mean putting my first additional carriage on hold for the time being. I decided not to rush, as the extra docking time I purchased allowed me the luxury of a proper rest. When the countdown entered its final hour, I opened the trading platform to scout the market. The rules were peculiar. While conductors could only list items for sale after leaving a station, those of us still docked were free to purchase anything already available. This seemed like a transparent attempt to prevent station-to-station supply transfers, yet it did nothing to stop private trades or purchases by those currently docked. It felt like a glaring loophole, one that made me wonder if the entity behind train survival was subtly hinting that we could ignore the rules to a certain extent. I focused my efforts on trading for metal, scanning my pile of low-grade rifles and compressed biscuits. In a world like this, security and food were the ultimate commodities. However, as I refreshed the platform, I found that while some had posted metal, the quantities were tiny and the prices were absurdly inflated. It was clear that most people were just testing the waters rather than looking for fair trades. Turning to the chat room, I saw it scrolling wildly with messages from conductors who had already moved on from their first stops. One person complained about finding nothing but scrap tires at a garbage station, while another lamented arriving at a stinking grassland filled with black mud. When a few people pointed out that black soil could be used to grow vegetables, others mocked the idea, pointing out the lack of space on the train. The conversation shifted when someone posted a blueprint for a basic mechanical fishing rod, sparking a mixture of envy and confusion. It became apparent that many passengers hadn't found any blueprints at all. People quickly began haggling, offering their starting bread and water rations for mechanical parts. It was a desperate scene, with some even offering to trade for half a loaf of bread just to survive. The atmosphere turned sour when the topic of treasure chests came up. Those who hadn't found any grew hostile, demanding that others share their information for the sake of collective survival. Eventually, someone buckled under the pressure and posted a screenshot showing they had opened a level 1 treasure chest to find 2 train coins, a healing salve, and a blueprint for an aluminum insulation pad. Based on the progression of the rewards, I calculated that if a level 1 treasure chest contains 2 train coins and level 2 contains 4, then a level 3 chest should logically yield 6. Compared to my level 2 haul, the rewards from the first level seemed considerably meager, though I knew that medicine was a precious commodity in this world, and any amount of coins was a step forward. Suddenly, a message in the public chat caught my eye. A user named Li Xiaosheng was asking if anyone wanted metal, stating he had some available for trade and was giving priority to weapons. The fact that he was prioritizing armaments over food suggested he didn't lack basic survival capabilities. I preferred dealing with capable individuals rather than those who couldn't even fill their own stomachs yet, so I decided to reach out to him. A line of text soon appeared in our private chat as Li Xiaosheng asked if I was looking to trade for metal. I countered by asking how much he had, to which he cautiously asked how much I needed. It was clear he was being guarded, but his response confirmed he possessed a substantial amount. When I asked if he could produce 150 kilograms of metal, the chat went silent. I could imagine him staring at the message in disbelief. That was enough for a full level 1 train upgrade, and he likely wondered how I had already gathered the necessary wood and mechanical parts, or what gave me the confidence to make such a massive purchase. After a moment of hesitation, he replied that he could provide it, but questioned what I had to trade, noting that the starter dagger would only fetch him 10 kilograms. I simply asked how he felt about a rifle. Using the system's photo function, I sent him a picture of one of the average low-grade rifles I had salvaged. I offered him 1 gun and 20 bullets in exchange for his 150 kilograms of metal. His shock was immediate. He accused me of robbery, claiming that even a gun wasn't worth such a steep price. I remained unfazed as I played with a bullet, knowing full well that as the only person selling firearms, I held all the cards. I told him the price wasn't expensive at all, reminding him of the sheer value of a gun and the unknown dangers awaiting us at the next station. Having a firearm would significantly improve his chances of survival, and he knew I was right. He had obtained over 300 kilograms of metal and a treasure chest at his first stop, which likely made him feel like the luckiest person alive. But that pride clearly paled in comparison to the weapon in my hands. When he tried to lower the price to 100 kilograms, I stroked my chin and narrowed my eyes. He had revealed his hand by showing how much he wanted the gun, so I refused to budge. I told him he could take the deal or I would simply find someone else who was more eager. He gritted his teeth and asked for time to think, but I gave him only 10 seconds, claiming I was busy. He had no way of knowing I was still at the first station, or that I was focused on building a carriage rather than a simple engine upgrade. Finally, he hardened his resolve and agreed to the trade. He asked why I needed so much metal and if I had blueprints to mass produce these guns, clarifying that he wasn't trying to steal my secrets but wanted to know if we could trade again in the future. He boasted that he was confident he could reach level 2 within 3 stops, and offered to promote my weapons once he became known as a top-tier conductor. I found his confidence amusing. If he considered reaching level 2 in 3 stops to be strong, I wondered what he would think of me reaching it before even entering the first station. I decided to humor his delusions of grandeur and simply told him to proceed with the trade. I was curious to see how the system handled transactions. Following the prompts, I placed the rifle and bullets on an empty spot, and a virtual glow instantly swapped them for neatly stacked metal ingots. It was an incredibly convenient and interesting process, moderated by the system's impartial arbitration. With my new resources secured, I placed the basic carriage blueprint on the processing station. A translucent screen appeared, confirming the materials were ready. When I selected the option to construct, the wood, metal, and mechanical parts vanished, reassembling through a mysterious force at the rear of the train. The new carriage descended smoothly onto the tracks and connected to the locomotive with a satisfying click. The system notified me that construction was complete and mentioned that I could further modify it with glass and fiber. For now, it was a spacious, empty shell about 10 meters long, roomy, bright, and exactly what I needed. It lacked glass in the window frames and had no external door, requiring entry through the rear of the locomotive, but it felt right. A train shouldn't just be an engine, after all. I nodded in satisfaction and checked my stats. Deciding my stamina and mental energy were too low for further sublimation, I began moving my supplies from the locomotive into the new carriage. I still had 40 minutes left on the countdown, plenty of time to return to the armory and gather whatever remained. My current stats sat at a weary 21 for stamina and 59 for mental energy, leaving me in an official status of exhausted. Inside the train, I lay motionless on the floor like a salted fish that had lost all hope of moving again. During these final moments, I had drained my last reserves of strength, making 2 final round trips to the armory. But I hadn't forgotten my earlier promise. Despite the physical strain of hauling materials, I managed to use a shovel to dig a grave for those skeletal remains, and even erected an unmarked tombstone as a final gesture of respect. That marked the conclusion of my harvest at this station. As the departure countdown finally reached 0, the previously stationary train began to groan and slowly lurch forward. Ahead of the locomotive, those familiar spatial distortions reappeared, and the train steadily accelerated through the boundary, returning once more to the endless expanse of the desolate wasteland. Simultaneously, the train's broadcast system crackled to life. It announced that all conductors had left the platform and offered a hollow congratulations to the 9,892 individuals who had successfully departed from the first novice station. The voice then warned us that we had officially exited the newcomer safety period. Starting from the second station, there would no longer be a guarantee that trains would stop in safe areas. This announcement caused an immediate uproar in the chat. Some questioned the timing, wondering why we had seemingly left the platform an hour later than expected, while others realized with frustration that someone must have stayed an extra hour at the first station. There were even those calling me a cheater, and others lamenting that they hadn't realized the first station was actually safe. Some conductors shared grim stories, like one whose first station was a desert where they nearly perished in quicksand. I remained largely unaware of their bickering, as I was far too busy sitting on the floor organizing my final haul. My inventory was now quite impressive. 49 low-level marksman rifles, 1,100 rounds of low-grade bullets, 150 kilograms of wood, 104 kilograms of metal, and 162 mechanical parts. I had also salvaged a variety of usable tools like crowbars, shovels, and screwdrivers. I tossed the broken ones into the processing station for recycling and kept the rest as backups. My current blueprints for the water tank and garbage collector required 40 kilograms of metal and 110 mechanical parts, which barely made a dent in these newfound reserves. After placing the blueprints and allocating the resources, the control system allowed for their installation. I commanded the system to place the water tank inside the carriage and mount the collector on the left exterior. Once the installation was complete, I walked back to find a fixed metal water tank with wheels occupying a section of my new carriage. It could hold 1,000 kilograms of water and featured non-removable layers to keep clean and contaminated water separate. I poured in the 50 kilograms of polluted water I'd brought from the armory, feeling a slight pang of disappointment that I didn't yet have a purification system. Though I wasn't particularly anxious about it, I decided it was time to test the market, so I posted my first message in the public chat room. I stated that I was buying water, glass, fiber, blueprints, and various resources, offering firearms and food in exchange. As I expected, the mention of guns caused an immediate frenzy. While some shamelessly begged for weapons or asked if I was a big shot upgrading my train, others offered themselves as lackeys or tried to guilt-trip me into equitable distribution, for the sake of humanity. I noticed several non-Chinese names among the flooded private messages, which surprised me momentarily before I realized this world likely pulled people from all over, perhaps even different versions of Earth. I probably blocked anyone attempting moral blackmail or looking for handouts and began filtering for real potential. A woman named Shangguan Yingshui offered 20 kilograms of lake water, though she specified she wouldn't provide a container. I replied to her with a touch of detachment, noting that lake water could be lethal without filtration, and that she needed to show more sincerity if she wanted to trade for a gun. She seemed frustrated but asked me to name my price. I demanded 50 kilograms. In this world, water was arguably more precious than metal, especially since few people had storage containers even if they found a source. My true minimum was 30 kilograms of undrinkable water for one gun, but I knew I had the leverage here. Ultimately, I was only one person. No matter how many guns I held, converting them into bulk resources was the only practical path forward. She eventually agreed to the 50 kilograms, though she reminded me quite sharply that I would have to handle the storage myself. I couldn't help but wonder if I had quoted too low when the other party agreed so instantly. But I wasn't one for second-guessing my decisions. I confirmed the deal and prepared to proceed. But Shangguan Yingshui quickly added that she needed more bullets and food. It made me curious. Where was this woman getting so much water? Having large quantities wasn't necessarily shocking. She had mentioned it was lake water, so her first stop likely bordered a lake. But what truly puzzled me was how she was storing it. Until the 3-hour docking period at the first station ended, both the trading platform and the chat room were supposedly restricted. Had she found containers, or built them from blueprints like I had? I didn't ask. In this world, everyone had their secrets. I set my prices clearly. 5 low-grade bullets per kilogram of water, no container required on her end. For food, I offered military compressed biscuits at a rate of 1 biscuit for 5 kilograms of water. She agreed immediately, requesting 100 bullets and 3 biscuits. Combined with the previous rifle and its ammunition, that brought the total to 85 kilograms of lake water. When she asked if I had enough containers or if I needed to buy some from her, I told her it wasn't necessary and initiated the trade. The trading point materialized directly above my water tank. As the firearms and bullets vanished, 85 kilograms of water manifested out of thin air, cascading into the reservoir. Between this and my previous trades, I now possessed 135 kilograms of water. I stared at the clear liquid, resisting the urge to take a drink. It looked clean enough, but I knew that drinking unfiltered, unboiled lake water was a death sentence. We finished the transaction with a standard professional sign-off, and she silently sent a friend request, which I accepted without hesitation. Compared to the pretentious Li Xiaosheng, I preferred her quiet, no-nonsense style. I spent the next several hours successively selling off numerous rifles and ammunition. In return, I acquired the fiber and glass needed to reinforce my new carriage. Once I applied the upgrades, glass panes appeared in the frames, transforming the drafty compartment into a proper room. It was a bountiful harvest. By the time I finished, I had 21 rifles left. I hadn't stuck to fixed prices, choosing instead to sell whenever an offer seemed reasonable. These low-level items would only depreciate as people unlocked better blueprints, so hoarding them would have been unwise. Finally done for the day, I enjoyed a proper dinner of traded bread and mineral water before curling up in a warm corner of the front cabin. I was too exhausted to worry about survival. My only thought was sleep. As the train rumbled through the wasteland, I watched the high-hanging moon until my eyes finally drifted shut. I woke up shivering from the night's chill, rubbing the sleep from my eyes and stretching my stiff neck. The wasteland outside was as desolate as ever, shrouded in a cold, lonely light from the giant moon. I checked the timestamp, 3:37 a.m. The chat room was still scrolling, proving that few others were able to sleep as soundly as I had. Since I couldn't get back to sleep anyway, I brushed off the dust and stood up. My stamina and mental energy had mostly restored, which meant it was time for more sublimation. I decided to start with the Colt M1911. It was already a work of art, and I was eager to see what it would become, especially since the next stop was guaranteed to be dangerous. I commanded the system to sublimate, feeling the stamina drain away. The pitch-black frame developed faint, elegant patterns and grew slightly larger, now requiring a firm grip to wield. It had become a level 3 blacklight enchanted pistol, capable of consuming my stamina to convert standard bullets into armor-piercing rounds. The cost was 40 stamina points, which felt acceptable. I set up some metal scraps as a makeshift target and pulled the trigger while channeling my energy. A deafening blast and a searing muzzle flash followed as an armor-piercing round tore through the air, punching a perfect hole through the target. I was floored. Aside from the heavy recoil, it hardly felt like a pistol anymore. At a cost of 2 stamina per special round, it was a sustainable edge. The system hinted it could be sublimated further, but I decided against it. The recoil was already at the limit of what I could manage. I still had enough energy for more, so I moved into the new carriage and touched the wall, calling for a sublimation. To my surprise, it only cost 25 stamina and no mental energy. The space transformed into a level 2 cozy train carriage, imbued with enchanted warmth that maintained a constant 22 degrees Celsius interior regardless of the weather outside. No more waking up freezing for me. Satisfied, I retrieved a traded blanket and spread it on the floor. The stamina loss was the perfect cure for insomnia, and I knew I needed to conserve my energy for the second stop tomorrow. That night, while others stayed awake shivering in the biting wind, I slept in total comfort. I woke up at 10:27 a.m. and stretched my stiff limbs. I estimated that since we entered the first station at 1 p.m. yesterday, we would likely arrive at the next one around the same time today, though I wondered if my 1-hour delay would push my arrival back. When I stepped out of the warm carriage and returned to the locomotive, the temperature drop was jarring. My control panel was flooded with messages. As the unsafe second station approached, the value of my firearms was skyrocketing. One message from a user named Lu Zhu caught my eye. He asked if blueprints could be used for trading. Until now, no one had been willing to part with a blueprint, as they were essentially infinite production machines. I asked what he had, and he sent over a screenshot of a level 1 train seat blueprint. It was just a chair, hardly a top-tier item, but it was a permanent asset. I decided to trade, offering a gun and 10 bullets. I reasoned that while guns were precious, their value was temporary, whereas a blueprint provided endless utility. Lu Zhu was incredibly grateful, bordering on desperate. He claimed that without the gun, he would definitely die at the next station. His certainty made me wonder if he had a talent related to foresight or danger sensing. I didn't press him. I simply completed the trade and went to the processing station to manufacture my new black chair. Sitting in it felt like a return to civilization. I spent the final hour before arrival closing out a few more arms deals, selling 15 rifles and 300 bullets. I kept the rest for my own protection. With my stats nearly full at 98 stamina and 100 spirit, I took one of my own rifles and sublimated it. It cost 13 points and turned into a level 2 exquisite marksman rifle. It wasn't as powerful as my enchanted pistol, but it was a significant upgrade. As the countdown dwindled, the chat room grew quiet and oppressive. 30 minutes before arrival, my Crossroads of Fate module triggered, offering me a choice between a level 2 hunting platform, called the Goblin Camp, or a level 3 collection platform, called the White Forest. I noticed the module was providing more detail now, including station levels and types. I wondered if the armory had been level 1, and if my train upgrade had unlocked these higher tier options. I chose the White Forest, assuming a collection platform would be less hazardous than a Goblin Camp. The spatial fluctuations engulfed the train, and 5 minutes later, we were surrounded by a grayish-white light. Outside the window lay a forest of bone-white trunks and leaves. The system reported a 4-hour stay and a low-risk warning. Interestingly, no one in the chat had ever mentioned seeing hazard ratings, so I suspected that was another benefit of my exclusive module. I geared up, holstering my pistol, and slinging the rifle over my shoulder alongside a backpack of supplies. When I pressed the door release and stepped out, the world was tomb silent. The quiet was so absolute I could hear my own pulse. I scanned the deep white woods, wondering what exactly a collection platform had to offer besides wood. Then, through the silent trees, I spotted what looked like a path. I stepped onto the path and ventured deeper into the woods, my senses heightening with every step. I remained hyper-vigilant against potential dangers the entire way, my hand never far from my weapon, but fortunately, the silence remained unbroken. As the path ended deep within the gray-white forest, a cluster of trees bearing pale fruit came into view. I wondered if these were the specific collection items the station had to offer. Approaching one of the trees, I used my dagger to slice a stem and caught a fruit as it fell. When I brought it close to my nose, a sweet yet slightly bitter aroma wafted over, a scent unlike any fruit I'd ever encountered in my previous world. I swallowed hard, staring at it. The fragrance was so intoxicating that an inexplicable primal craving to devour it surged through me. Just as I was about to take a bite, a sudden sharp sense of danger snapped me back to reality. I hurled the fruit away instantly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stood there panting, wondering what on earth had just happened. A quick glance at my stats showed my stamina at 93, but my spirit had plummeted to 72. Cold sweat drenched my skin. My spirit had been full just moments ago, yet it had dropped drastically in the few seconds I held that fruit. I wasn't lacking food or water, so my desperation to eat a potentially poisonous object was unnatural. The rate of spirit depletion was terrifying, faster even than during a sublimation. These fruits were a trap. I took several steps back, frowning at the pale harvest. It was a nuisance that the train's appraisal function only worked on board, but I suspected the low risk of this station was tied directly to these hallucinogens. Perhaps it was only the scent that caused the lapse in judgment. After some hesitation, I decided I couldn't leave empty-handed. I needed to get them back to the train for a proper analysis. I used my dagger to rip a piece of cloth from my clothing, tying it over my nose and mouth as a makeshift mask. The old saying proved true: men die for wealth as birds die for food. Even knowing these fruits were lethal, I couldn't bring myself to abandon them. I became a diligent farmer in that eerie, silent forest, harvesting until my backpack was heavy. As I wiped the sweat from my brow, I felt thankful for my dagger. Without it, this task would have been far more difficult. Once back on the train, I immediately ran an appraisal. The system identified them as level 3 white forest fruits. In their unprocessed state, they released a hallucinogenic aroma that drained spirit, and eating them would permanently decrease one's maximum spirit. However, if processed by soaking them in cold water for 5 minutes, they would rapidly restore spirit and slightly increase hallucination resistance. I patted my chest in relief, feeling as though I'd narrowly escaped a disaster. This was a necessary wake-up call. I had thought myself cautious, but clearly I needed to be better. I eagerly dumped the harvest into the water tank. After 5 minutes, they transformed from gray-white to a brilliant pure white. I took a bite, and an explosion of incredibly sweet juice filled my mouth. It was delicious, better than any fruit I'd ever tasted. Compared to this, the biscuits and bread I'd been eating felt like cardboard. Joy sparked in my eyes as I realized the value of this find. I emptied my backpack of other supplies, grabbed my 2 guns and my dagger, and set out again. Each round trip took about 20 minutes, and filling the bag took another 10. With only 4 hours total, I had no time to waste. As I exited, I noticed the trash recycling device I'd installed was actually operating. A small cube-shaped robot, barely calf-high, was shuttling between the forest and the train, bringing back leaves and stones. It seemed pretty useless to me, but since it was already built, I let it be. I spent the next few hours as a whirlwind of activity, my dagger flashing as I stripped tree after tree. By the time the countdown reached its final 30 minutes, I had gathered over 100 pounds of fruit. It was a shame to leave, as I didn't know if I'd ever find something this delicious again, but I refused to let greed make me miss the departure. I leaned back in my seat, munching on a fruit, while I organized my stores. I had my harvest, 79 biscuits, and 21 bottles of purified water. For now, survival wasn't a concern. I opened the chat room to see how the others were faring, and the numbers immediately stopped me cold. 8,721 out of 10,000. Over 1,000 people were gone, and we were only at the second station. The messages were a chorus of misery. People dying from drinking unboiled lake water, others with punctured lungs from wild bull attacks, and many more begging for medicine or food. Modern medical luxuries were gone. Out here, a simple wound could be a death sentence. While I had used my crossroads of fate to find a safe collection zone, others were being chased by boars or trapped in toxic mud. As my own countdown neared its end, I remembered the little recycling robot. I figured if it had found 10 kilograms of wood, it would be a miracle. I walked back to the station with zero expectations, only to freeze in my tracks. Among the literal trash was a pale gray wooden box, a level 3 treasure chest. I couldn't believe my eyes. I hadn't dared venture deep into the woods for fear of getting lost, yet this little machine had wandered off and found exactly what I needed. I patted its square head with newfound appreciation, feeling a bit guilty for looking down on it. It was worth every resource I'd spent. I resisted the urge to open it immediately. A level 3 chest, if sublimated, would become level 4, guaranteeing better coins and rarer items. My stats were at 45 stamina and 92 mental energy. I gave the command to sublimate, feeling the familiar drain pull at my very soul. When it was over, I was physically spent but mentally soaring. With a creak, I opened the level 4 treasure chest. The rewards were staggering. 8 train coins, an external alert tower system, white forest fruit seeds, a gray-white paint scheme, and an advanced ceramic bulletproof vest. I marveled at the loot, knowing how envious the chat would be if they knew, though I kept the success to myself. Bragging only breeds enemies. I noticed that I couldn't sublimate these new items further. The cost was simply beyond my current total capacity. It seemed level 4 was a major threshold. I immediately installed the alert tower atop the locomotive. It was a sophisticated piece of tech that could equip ranged weapons and provide automated defense within 100 meters, even seeing through invisibility. I equipped 5 of my remaining rifles to it, feeling a massive surge in my sense of security. As for the seeds, they required special white forest soil and 30 days to mature, consuming half a kilogram of fresh water daily. It was a steep price, but I was one of the few who could afford it. In the final 3 minutes before departure, I scrambled to fill several crates with the gray soil the seeds required. I also processed the trash the robot had gathered, gaining some wood and white pigments from the leaves and stones. As the train began to move, I watched the white forest recede into the distance. I was back in the wilderness, but I was stronger than before. I stretched leisurely and noticed my private messages blinking. There was only one person on my friend list. It was Shangguan Yingshui, asking if I still needed water. I typed out a message to her, making my position clear from the start. I asked what she needed but warned her up front that I didn't have any firearms left to trade. I waited for a long time without a reply, eventually assuming she decided against the deal. Just as I was about to close the private chat, a message finally blinked onto the screen. She apologized for the delay, explaining that she had just been taking a bath. A bath? I glanced over at my own water storage tank, momentarily stunned. Just how much water did this woman have to be wasting it so lavishly? Even with my current success, I hadn't even considered being that extravagant. I told her it was no problem and asked what she wanted to trade, reminding her of my lack of guns. On the other side of the connection, inside Shangguan Yingshui's train, a black-haired girl with waist-length hair stood up from a large wooden tub that dominated most of her carriage. As she tied up her hair, her light blue eyes remained calm and unreadable. She sent over a list: 32 kilograms of wood, 50 kilograms of metal, and 40 mechanical parts. She added that she was fairly certain I had those items. I raised an eyebrow at the screen. I didn't answer directly, instead questioning why she was so sure I had them, and even if I did, why I wouldn't just use them for my own train upgrades. She replied that she simply hated trouble. She'd gathered some materials herself, but dealing with too many people took more time than she liked. She'd calculated that I was likely the only one capable of providing bulk materials right now. After all, I'd sold over 20 rifles, and aside from food and water, I had to be receiving materials in exchange. She was right, though she didn't know the half of it. I'd actually sold over 40. I had the resources she wanted, but trading them for mere water didn't interest me anymore. My reserves were sufficient for the moment, and I'd even seen people in the chat room discussing how to boil lake water to make it safe. It wasn't a method I wanted to rely on unless I was desperate, but it made raw water less valuable. Shangguan Yingshui remained silent for a while as she dried herself, then sent a screenshot that immediately changed my mind. It was a level 1 water purification device, capable of filtering wastewater at a rate of 1 kilogram per hour. I rubbed my eyes, staring at the image. Something like this actually existed? It explained her lavish bathing. She could simply filter and recycle the water. Given her willingness to trade it, I suspected she might even have the blueprint. When I asked her if she did, she didn't confirm or deny it, simply stating that the device should be enough to cover the resources she needed. I suppressed my surprise. Whatever secrets she held, I was lucky enough to be getting the tech. I agreed to the trade, and once the transaction was complete, I found the device could be perfectly installed between my wastewater and clean water tanks. Once activated, the purified water would flow automatically into storage, saving me an immense amount of trouble. Naturally, I called upon sublimation. Since it was a small level 1 item, the energy drain was minimal. It transformed into a level 2 premium water purification device, tripling the output to 3 kilograms per hour and adding the ability to purify non-freshwater sources, like seawater. Feeling a surge of goodwill, I sent her another message, asking if she could upgrade her train and if she'd be willing to share what the upgrade options looked like. I was curious to see if her choices matched mine. She hesitated but eventually sent a screenshot of her level 2 options. She had the basic carriage and the extended stop time, which were identical to mine, but her random options were a welding tool set and a wooden bed blueprint. It confirmed my theory. The carriage and time extension were fixed, while the others were random and varied in quality. Her options were noticeably inferior to the ones I'd been offered. As I was nodding in understanding, she asked if I had any train coins. I told her I didn't, and when she followed up by asking if I still wanted to buy more water, my mouth twitched. Knowing she was recycling her bath water, the idea of buying more from her felt unappealing. I declined, and the chat ended. I knew she wanted the coins to buy her own options, but I barely had enough for myself. I still had one critical choice left to make: the train burst acceleration device blueprint. It cost 5 train coins, an amount most people would take several stations to accumulate, but I had more than enough. I finalized the purchase, leaving me with 4 coins. The device required 50 kilograms of metal and 200 mechanical parts to build, and it would allow me to produce acceleration bullets that could triple the train's speed for 10 minutes. It was expensive, but undoubtedly worth the cost. The trading platform was becoming more diverse after the second station, but food and water remained the most desperate needs for the majority. Those barrels of compressed biscuits I'd looked down on were suddenly looking like a gold mine. I shook my head, glancing at the resources I'd finally managed to scrape together. It had taken 7 biscuits and a fair amount of effort to pry those mechanical parts from others. Now I understood why Shangguan Yingxue hated trading. Haggling with people and constantly adjusting prices over mere scraps of food was an exhausting waste of time. I fed the materials into the processing station, and the blueprint for the acceleration device began to emit a deep sapphire glow. Before my eyes, metal and machinery fused, coalescing into a complex mechanical heart. The system noted that the train burst acceleration device could only be installed on the main body, near the control system. Once integrated, it would produce acceleration bullets, limited to 3 uses per day. My heart sank slightly when I saw the cost. 1 kilogram of metal, 20 mechanical parts, and 1 train coin per bullet. Even the ammunition required currency. I wondered what a little sublimation would do to it. With my stamina at 55 and spirit at 70 after a few white forest fruits, I figured I had enough for 1 attempt. I poured 30 stamina and 40 spirit into the device, watching it transform into the red triple-speed train acceleration device. The maximum capacity increased to 5 bullets per day, though the potential for further sublimation was now exhausted. Following the system's prompt, I placed it near the control panel. A silvery light swallowed the device, and a sleek black loading port materialized on the console. It was a pricey investment. I spent 2 of my remaining coins to produce 2 silvery shells, each as thick as a baby's arm. I winced at the expense as I tucked my last 2 coins away. I was tempted to test the speed, but I wasn't feeling quite that extravagant yet. It was time to rest. As I drifted off, I couldn't help but wonder if the low spirit side effects were just empty threats. I hadn't felt a thing. When I finally woke, both my stamina and spirit were back to a full 100. I stretched in the warmth of the climate-controlled carriage, washing my face while humming a quiet tune. Walking to the back, I checked on the seed I'd buried in the ashen soil. It was unchanged, so I decided to see if sublimation could jumpstart its growth. It cost me 30 stamina points, but the result was a blessed white forest fruit seed. The growth cycle plummeted from 30 days to just 9 to sprout, 3 to mature. Better yet, it would produce 1 blessed fruit daily once ripe. I buried it back in the dirt and gave it some water, feeling quite satisfied. On my way back to the front, I stopped by the garbage recycling robot. I promised to upgrade the little guy, after all. I crouched down and knocked on its oversized matchbox head, calling for a sublimation. Strangely, the stamina I funneled into it simply vanished with no effect. Frowning at the first failure I'd encountered, I tried again, this time using spirit. At the cost of 40 spirit points, a familiar radiance enveloped the machine. It emerged as the GT-1 automatic treasure hunting robot. Its purpose was clear. It would automatically leave the train at stations to locate treasure chests, mapping out the ones it couldn't carry back. It would cost 1 train coin per use, and would forcibly return before the train departed. Camera-like eyes emerged from the box, rotating a full 360 degrees before locking onto my face to confirm my ID. It asked for a name, and I couldn't help but think of an old-world movie character. I named it Wally. It immediately entered sleep mode, waiting for a coin to wake up at the next station. Between the acceleration bullets and the robot, it felt like I was heading for financial ruin. I realized that most people at this stage probably didn't understand the true value of train coins yet. They were still just trying to find enough bread to see tomorrow. I quickly checked the chat room and saw I was right. People were opening chests and wondering if the coins were just some future station currency. Seizing the opportunity, I listed a trade. 1 compressed biscuit, and 1 water bottle for a single train coin. If someone took the bait, great. If not, no loss. By 12:30 p.m., the familiar Crossroads of Fate prompt appeared. I had to choose between the Level 2 Goblin Village, a hunting station, or Doomsday Town, a Level 2 mission station. To me, a mission station sounded like a new opportunity, far better than the mindless trouble of slaying goblins. I made my choice and felt the train lurch into an acceleration. The world ahead dissolved into white noise, and when the countdown hit 0, the transformation was total. I looked out at Doomsday Town. The docking countdown began its 4-hour crawl, but the system's final warning sat heavy in the air. This station wasn't just low risk anymore. It was labeled as dangerous. The train hissed to a halt, and I peered through the glass to survey my new surroundings. This station was a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness of the previous 2. Instead, a harsh sun hung high in the sky, casting a brilliant but unforgiving light over the landscape. The view was haunting. Deep red stains marred the asphalt of the streets, and rows of rusted abandoned cars choked the thoroughfares. Doomsday Town. The name was fitting. I turned to my small companion. It was time for Wally to get to work. I winced slightly as I dropped a precious train coin into its slot, watching the little bot wobble away through the recycling chute. A part of me wondered if some lurking monster might mistake it for a toy and snatch it up, but I had my own problems to worry about. Specifically, I needed to figure out the task for the station. The answer presented itself soon enough. Through the window, I spotted a corpse slumped nearby, its cold fingers still clutching a backpack. A piece of parchment tucked inside flapped rhythmically in the wind, but it was too far away to read. I did a final equipment check before heading out. I had food, water, my finely crafted rifle slung over my shoulder, and both my black gloss pistol and sharp dagger at my waist. Most importantly, I was wearing the advanced ceramic bulletproof vest I'd scavenged. I had already sublimated the armor, streamlining it from a bulky bucket-like frame into a form-fitting vest that sacrificed none of its protective integrity. Fully armed, I pressed the door release. The doors hissed open, and I stepped out, instinctively closing them behind me with a flick of my wrist. Since only the conductor could operate the doors, I didn't have to worry about unwanted guests sneaking into my home while I was away. Immediately, a wave of scorching heat rolled over me, carrying a nauseating stench, a foul mix of rotten salted fish and long-decayed bread. Approaching the body, I used the barrel of my rifle to nudge the backpack open so I could read the parchment. The note began by claiming the deceased was a great courier for the Run Company. Looking at the remains, there wasn't much greatness left, but the writer seemed to have possessed a dark sense of humor, noting that they were probably about to die, but that the courier's mission must never be broken. The task was simple: deliver the contents of the bag to a silverware shop in the southeast corner of town. The note promised a great reward from the Run Company if I showed his badge. So, this was the mission. Curious, I looked inside the bag and found a cake sealed in a transparent box, remarkably well preserved. Happy birthday was written across it in jam. Judging by the state of the body, that birthday was a long-forgotten event. I decided that while the celebration was over, the cake was still a prize worth keeping. I also found a mechanical badge featuring a gear-driven image of a running courier and a map of the town with a red dot marking my destination. Map in hand, I began my trek. The road was a graveyard of skeletons and dark red stains that whispered of old horrors. Suddenly, I spotted movement. A hyena feeding on a corpse. It was the first living creature I'd seen here, or so I thought until it turned its head. Its skull was rotted through and its heart was exposed. It wasn't a dog, it was a zombie. The creature let out a guttural growl and lunged. I told myself to stay calm, suppressed the rising panic in my chest, and raised my pistol. I pulled the trigger repeatedly. I wasn't exactly a marksman, but at that range, one bullet found its mark and the impact was powerful enough to blow the creature apart. I knew I had to move fast. The gunfire would act like a dinner bell for every monster in the vicinity. Taking a calculated detour, I managed to reach the silverware shop without further incident. To my surprise, the area was eerily quiet. I stood before the tightly closed metal shutter, wondering if there was anyone left to receive the delivery. Just as I considered prying it open, the shutter slid up just a crack. I immediately leveled my rifle at the gap. A hoarse voice from the darkness begged me not to shoot, claiming to be human. I stayed back, identified myself as a Run Company courier taking over the delivery, and showed the badge. In this wasteland, a professional title seemed to command more respect than a wandering stranger. A scruffy, bearded man in his 40s peered out, chuckling that only couriers, lunatics, and monsters were brave enough to be outside these days. He invited me in, but I kept my rifle aimed at his head. I wasn't taking any chances. I handed over the cake and demanded the reward. The man stared at the cake with a pained expression, muttering that it was a pity I hadn't come earlier. He retreated into the shop and returned with a box. Inside were 3 train coins. This confirmed my suspicion. These coins were likely the universal currency across all station worlds. But as I reached for the coins, the man's demeanor shifted instantly. He lunged forward and grabbed the barrel of my rifle with unmistakable murderous intent. I didn't hesitate. I pulled the trigger. A blast echoed, a severed hand flew, and the rolling shutter burst open. The man behind the door was no longer human. He had swollen into a grotesque monster, his face twisted in a mask of grief and rage. He screamed about his daughter just wanting a cake and cursed the useless couriers for taking too long. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and kept firing. 3 rounds hit home, but the creature's hardened hide shrugged off the upgraded rifle's power. He slammed a fist into my chest, sending me flying. I gritted my teeth and forced myself up, my stomach churning. If not for my enhanced vest, that single hit would have ended me. The monster shrieked and charged again. I fired another shot, and he laughed, claiming my bullets didn't scare him. I smirked and told him to look down. He paused, seeing his body riddled with holes he hadn't even felt. I didn't give him a second chance. I drew my blacklight enchanted pistol, which thrummed with an eerie glow. Converting my stamina into armor-piercing rounds, I stepped close and pressed the muzzle to his forehead. One final bang, and it was over. The silence returned. I realized why no other monsters were nearby. This was the big guy's territory. After catching my breath, I retrieved the cake and the 3 train coins, feeling a flicker of regret for the waste of it all. I opened the shutter fully to find a clean silverware shop filled with silver crossbow bolts and spearheads. On a shelf, I found a diary. The entries told a heartbreaking story. A father finding coins in a broken locomotive and trying to buy a birthday cake to cure his sick daughter. By March 11th, she had died without ever tasting something sweet. By March 15th, the man had lost his mind. I walked to the backyard, found the small tombstone he had erected, and placed the cake before it. It felt like the only way to truly finish the mission. But the diary left me with a chilling thought. A broken locomotive outside town? Was it a conductor who had come before us? The idea that we weren't the first survivors in this game weighed heavily on me. I scavenged what I could, a crossbow and several silver items. They were heavy, but they felt important. On my return trip, the town felt more alive with monsters, and I realized how much I needed that extra hour my upgrade provided. I saw zombie animals of all kinds, but curiously, no humanoid ones. Back at the train, I checked the time. I still had 35 minutes. I checked my haul. Mithril bolts, a mithril cross, and a mithril sword, all level 2. I recycled the scraps into 10 kilograms of raw mithril, a fortune in my old world. I decided to sublimate the cross, turning it into a level 3 sanctified mithril cross that emitted holy light. As for the other weapons, I knew my limits. I was no swordsman, and my aim with a crossbow was even worse than with a pistol. I hung the cross at the front of the train and checked the trading platform. Someone had finally accepted my offer for train coins. I sat back, munching on a fruit and admiring my new coins before opening the chat room. The numbers were grim. 7,825 out of 10,000. Another 1,000 people were gone. Most were still struggling for the barest essentials, while I was sitting on a pile of mithril and enchanted weapons. The chat room was a chaotic mess of fear and confusion as people recounted their experiences at the 3rd station. Someone spoke of a cave crawling with spiders that they hadn't dared to enter, while another boasted of using a gun purchased from an expert to fend off wild dogs and secure a meal. My ears perked up at the mention of expert Ye. It seemed my reputation was growing, though some were quick to dismiss me. One voice insisted I was short-sighted and that his big brother Li Shaosheng was the true authority, claiming Li was on the verge of a level 2 upgrade. I remembered Li Shaosheng. He had confidently predicted he'd reach level 2 within 3 stations, and yet here we were at the 3rd, and he was only just announcing his success. He posted a screenshot of his upgrade options, inviting others to join his alliance if they had train coins, promising food and water to early recruits. I ignored his posturing and focused on the data. His options included a carriage blueprint, an automatic fishing rod, a survival rations recipe, and the 1-hour stop extension. As I suspected, the 1st and 4th options were identical to mine. The pattern was clear. While the rations were useless to me, the fishing rod was an interesting prospect for future water-based stations, though I felt no need to rush into buying it. With the Crossroads of Fate module, I'd have a 30-minute head start on information anyway. It was time to consider another train sublimation. I had been holding off to recover my stamina and accumulate more train coins. Between the silverware shop's bounty and my previous holdings, I had 4 coins. If Wally found a chest here, I'd be in an even stronger position. Just as I prepared to begin, the rhythmic clanking of treads outside caught my attention. I looked out to see Wally wobbling back through the recycling chute, clutching a candy box stained with dark red marks. The little robot was covered in deep bite marks, clearly the work of something far more vicious than a normal animal. I followed its trail with my eyes and saw dozens of zombie dogs circling the train, followed by lumbering, mutated humanoids similar to the shop owner I'd killed. I gave Wally's metal head a helpless rap, noting that it had led the monsters straight to my door. Still, it had brought back a level 2 treasure chest, so I couldn't be too angry. I picked up the box, completely unconcerned by the growing horde outside. This was only a level 2 station, and my train was equipped with a level 4 defensive sentry tower. As the monsters crossed the 100-meter perimeter, the red orb atop the tower locked on. Crimson circles painted the ground beneath their feet, and long rifle barrels extended from the shadows. The air filled with the steady crack of gunfire, each shot finding a lethal weak point. In less than 10 seconds, the clearing was littered with corpses. I watched the scene with a detached calm, munching on a white forest fruit as more monsters swarmed in, only to have their skulls shattered by the sentry's superior marksmanship. When the countdown hit 0, the train lurched forward. We slipped into the void, leaving the ruins of Doomsday Town behind for the familiar endless wilderness. The onboard broadcast chimed, announcing that the Newbie Protection period was over. Survival mode was now active, and the voice warned us to be cautious at night. Any train moving slower than 30 kilometers per h would enter a dangerous status. The chat room erupted in a fresh wave of panic, but I was focused on my own notifications. I had achieved an A-grade elimination rating for the station and completed a hidden mission, Town Liberator. My reward was a car exchange ticket. I patted Wally's head, realizing I would have missed this entirely without the little bot's mistake. I decided to sublimate the ticket first, transforming it into a special car exchange prize ticket for a level 2 special car. Upon activation, a basic storage car descended from the sky and locked onto my train. It was exactly what I needed, 48 units that could store unlimited quantities of items, finally clearing the clutter from my living quarters. But I wasn't done. I moved to the end of the new car and initiated another sublimation to push it to level 3. The cost was heavy, 25 stamina and 25 mental energy, plunging me back into exhaustion. However, the result was a storage unit car that not only prevented items from decaying, but offered 3 special units accessible from anywhere. It was essentially a portable inventory. I tested it by placing fruits into a unit and successfully manifesting one in my hand back in the locomotive. It was an incredible gain. Exhaustion tugged at me, but I still had the level 2 chest Wally had found. Pushing through the haze, I spent another 45 mental energy points to sublimate it into a level 3 chest. The warnings for mental collapse flashed red in my vision, but I felt nothing but a heavy, numbing fatigue. I pried the box open to find 6 train coins, a zombie slayer chainsaw sword, 3 virus serums, and a windproof lighter. With 10 train coins now in my possession, I was likely the wealthiest conductor in existence. I had the resources to claim every upgrade option the next time the train leveled up. But for now, my body was screaming for rest. I had pushed myself to the absolute limit, reaching a state of exhaustion I'd never known before.